Welcome to this session on the spoilage of cereals. The amount of cereals that we produce is more than adequate for our current population, but there is still inadequacy in the food supply. There are people who find it hard to meet their day-to-day requirements, and still there is poverty prevailing in the Indian population, and also a sizable segment of our population are malnourished. And it is also sad that there are people who starve, and there were people who died of starvation. The major reason behind the lack of food supply to the individual is because of the post-harvest loss. Post-harvest loss means after the yield, after the crop is taken away from the field, after the harvest, the grains should be stored properly. Due to lack of awareness, or due to lack of facility, or due to lack of technological support, the grains that have been cultivated and harvested are not being properly processed. And there is a gap between the yield and also the food that reaches man. There are plenty of losses during the process of handling, right? Handling is when the food is harvested until it reaches the table as a meal. In various steps, there are losses. And one significant loss is due to the spoilage that is caused by microorganisms. There are different kinds of microorganisms that can cause spoilage to the cereals. Not only after harvest, but also when they grow in the field, the spoilage starts. In every step, there can be spoilage with respect to the growth of microorganisms. In this segment, we will discuss in detail about the spoilage of the cereals and the cereal products. We shall see about the spoilage of cereals due to microbial activity. Introduction. Cereals are important foods which provide bulk to our dietary requirement. The major portion of the meal that we consume is composed of cereals. They are also a source of carbohydrates which are metabolized by our body for the production of energy, and it acts as the fuel for our body. Besides, cereals also provide minerals, proteins, and vitamins. India produces a large variety of cereals such as paddy, wheat, maize, barley, millets like jowar, bajra, ragi, maize, barley, oats, and rye. And there are many more. There are plenty of millets called as the small millets available and widely grown in India. Cereals and cereal products are significant and important human food resources, and also they are used to feed the livestock. Livestock means the animals, cattle, birds, or poultry. They are the raw material of many of our food and also certain beverages. We are solely dependent upon the millets and the cereals for our diet, and they are also used to prepare certain beverages also. Cereal products can be broadly classified into the following groups. Whole cereals, where only the husk of the grain is removed. The entire cereal is consumed as a food. Only the husk, the outer portion, is removed. Example, rice, wheat, and millets. The outer portion called as the husk is being removed and the entire rice is consumed. Milled grain products are made by removing the bran and usually the germ of the seed, and then it is crushed. The kernel, the rice kernel or the wheat kernel is crushed into various sized pieces. Okay, so this is called as the processed products of or the milled products of the cereals, and they include wheat flour. We have studied about the milling of wheat in our first year. It includes the wheat flour, maida or the refined wheat flour, and semolina, which we call as the ravai, and also the other products. Processed cereals is another type in which we consume the cereals, like the flour derived from the cereals, rice flour or wheat flour or the maize flour, and the dough prepared from the cereal flour, like the wheat flour dough or the rice dough, cake, bread, pasta, cornmeal, corn grits, weaning food, breakfast cereals, vermicelli, and the extruded products. These are all the processed cereal products. All of these are prepared from the cereals. And there is another category called as the ready mixes or ready to use foods. We call them as the convenience foods, like the snack foods, the dry mixes. We have upma mix or puttu mix, dry mixes, cake mixes. So different types of cakes are available in the form of mixes, like the chocolate cake mix and the idli mix, vada mix, etc. They are all the ready to eat or the ready to serve foods that are prepared from the cereals. In addition, cereal products are also used as an ingredient in various products, like they are used as batter and coating. They are used as batter like the idli batter or appam or dosa, whatever, and they are also used for coating when you prepare, say for example, cutlet. A maida flour is used as a coating, or bread crumbs are used as coatings. And the cereal flours are also used as thickeners and as sweeteners. They are used for thickening certain preparation. Rice flour added to water may be used as a thickener in several preparations. And they are also used as sweeteners, like the dextrose or the sucrose that are used as sweeteners, and the malt that is obtained from the cereals can also be used. Processed meats, infant foods, which are used for feeding the infant, weaning food, confectionery products, various snack items, and beverages. So, in all these, cereals are being incorporated. So, let us see about the spoilage of the cereals. The exterior of the harvested grains retain some of the natural flora they had while growing. So, as such, or naturally, the cereals will contain some kind of microorganisms because they are grown on the field exposed to the atmosphere. So, there will be certain natural microorganisms that occur in the cereals, and they are called as the natural flora. Plus, microorganisms can also enter the cereals due to contamination from the soil or due to insects or due to various other sources. Spoilage of food. Let us now see about what the spoilage of food is. Spoilage is a subjective quality. So when you ask what spoilage is. When a person consider one food at particular stage as spoiled, somebody may not consider that as a spoiled food. So it varies from one person to another person. There are people who will not use the food when there is a slight change in color or there is a slight change in flavor. While there may be people who will not mind that and they would consume the food. So spoilage is a subjective quality. It may be a spoiled food for one, when another person may not consider that as spoiled due to various reasons, including poverty. Spoilage is a term used to describe the deterioration of food texture, the food color, or the food odor, or the change in the flavor of the food to a point where it is unappetizing or unsuitable for human consumption. So, spoilage means there is a deterioration in the quality of the food. So, the deterioration could be in the form of the texture. A hard food may become soft. There may be changes in color. Say, for example, when there is a spoilage in cereals, there can be a change from white color to brown color, or there can be change in the odor of the food, that is the smell of the food. When it becomes unappetizing and it is unsuitable for human consumption, which means it is unfit for human consumption. Microbial spoilage of food often involves the degradation of protein, carbohydrates, and fats by the microorganisms or due to the action of the enzymes produced by the microorganisms. So not only they change the texture, color, flavor, and appearance of the food, but also they cause changes in the nutrients that are present in the food. The grains usually are non-perishable food. Non-perishable food means which has a longer shelf life, which can be stored for a longer period of time because they have low moisture content. The water content present in the cereals are very less, due to which they are less susceptible to spoilage and they have greater shelf life. Because we process the cereals, we dry the cereals adequately and we store them. There is less than 12% of moisture in the cereals, and therefore the cereals do not get spoiled very easily and they have a longer shelf life. The spoilage mainly occurs because of the moisture absorption by the cereals during storage. So, when actually the cereals get spoiled, we purchase the cereals and we store the cereals. When we store the cereals, you have to take adequate care during storage. It should be stored in containers where they are airproof and they are not open, they are not kept open. And several things have to be taken into account during the storage of the cereals. If you do not store the cereals properly in proper containers, if they are left exposed, or if there is no proper ventilation, or if it is not clean, if the surrounding is not clean, then there will be more chances of spoilage that can take place in the cereals. The spoilage in the cereals occur due to moisture absorption. When the cereals absorb moisture from the environment during storage, what happens when the cereals absorb the moisture? It leads to growth of the fungus. So that is a very ideal environment for the fungus to grow. So the fungus, they grow in moist environment. So, and the cereals, they are a good substratum. That is, they will provide all the nutrients that are required for the growth of the fungi at high temperature and humidity. Humidity is the amount of water present in the cereals. Before bulk packaging and storage, the whole grains need to be fumigated to reduce the microbial load. In some of our homes, we have the habit of procuring the cereals in bulk, maybe in kilograms or sacks, and we store it maybe for 1 month, 2 months. In some families where they have agricultural field, they also store the grains for a period of up to 1 year. While we do it in such a way, while we do bulk packaging and storage, the cereal should be fumigated. What is a fumigant? A fumigant is a chemical compound that will prevent the growth of fungus. So they have to be fumigated to reduce the microbial load. The fumigation is both organic and inorganic, and you can choose what type of fumigation can be used to prevent the spoilage in the cereals if they have to be stored for a long period of time. And the spoilage factors. The loss of cereals occur due to various factors, occurs due to different types of factors surrounding spoilage. Physical. Physical losses are caused by spillages which occur due to the use of faulty packaging material. Physical loss, what is physical loss? The amount of cereal present is now missing. If we have packed a 100 kg bag, and now if I take the weight, there is only 95 kg. What happened to that 5 kg of the cereal? That 5 kg of cereals has been lost because the packing was not done properly. There may be a hole in the sack, or there may be while we stitch the bags, they may not be stitched properly. Many a time we find that even in the road, we can find spillages. There may be a vehicle that is taking the cereals, a lorry that may be carrying the cereals, and you can find spillages even on the road. So that kind of loss is called as physical loss. It may be physiological. Physiological loss include respiration and heating in the grains. Even after harvest, the crops, they respire and it produces heating in the grain, temperature, humidity, and oxygen. There may be changes in the temperature of the grain based upon the activity of the microorganism, and also the presence and absence of oxygen. Biological loss occur due to microorganism, insects, and rodents. So biological loss is that which occurs due to the living organisms. It may be a microorganism like bacteria or algae or mold, or it could be due to insects. Insects also, they eat away the cereals. Sometimes we store the cereal, and after some time, when we go and look into the container where there is insects, all the cereals would have been converted into a flour. So the insects have eaten all the cereals that are present, and also due to rodents. Rodents are nothing but the rats. They also consume the cereals. So the physical, physiological, and the biological factors leads to loss of cereals. The spoilage factors occur due to contamination in the cereals. So how does the cereal get contaminated? The cereals, they get contaminated due to soil, air, insects, the natural microflora present in the harvested grains. If the cereals, grains, and the flour made from the cereals become moistened, moistened means when the humidity is more, above the minimum level, microbial growth will automatically occur. A little moistening will permit only growth of mold. If the moistening is less, if the humidity is less, there will be growth of mold. But if the moisture is more, it will allow the growth of yeast as well as bacteria. So from this we understand that the fungi can grow even at low humidity, low moisture content, and the yeast and bacteria require a little additional amount of moisture for their growth. The sources of microbial contamination of the cereals are varied, but all are traceable to the environment in which the grains are grown, where they grow, in what locality or in what geographical area do they grow, and how they are handled, and also the type of processing involved. Microorganisms that contaminate the cereal grains may come from air, dust, soil, water, insects, rodents, birds, animals, humans, harvesting equipment, storage, shipping containers, handling and processing equipment. So, there are various entry points for the microorganisms into the cereals during their processing. Many factors that are a part of the environment also influence the microbial contamination of cereals, including rainfall. Rainfall is a factor or an environmental phenomenon. So when there is more rainfall, the cereals can absorb more moisture and therefore it can enhance the growth of the microorganisms. Drought, humidity, temperature, sunlight, frost, soil conditions, wind, all these could be various factors that can add or can increase the microbial contact with the grain, and therefore it can lead to the spoilage of the grains. Secondary infection can occur post harvest. Grains can be contaminated not only in the field but also after they are harvested. They can be contaminated during the cleaning process, milling, grading, packaging, and also from equipments, containers, and conveyors. Microbial food spoilage can manifest itself in different ways, some of which often occurs in combination. So the factors causing food spoilage can be a single factor or can be a combination of several factors. Visible microbial growth may be apparent in the form of surface slime or colonies. We consider that a food is spoiled, and by appearance we will be able to say that the food is spoiled. The first appearance change in the food that is visible is the presence of a slimy layer on the food. Right over the food there may be a mucus like or a slimy layer or colonies present in the food. Degradation of structural components of the food can cause loss of texture. When there is spoilage in the cereal grains, the texture of the cereal is changed. It becomes soft, or it becomes inside, it becomes hollow or empty. So there is a loss of the texture. But the most common manifestation will be the chemical products of microbial metabolism. Apart from the surface changes, apart from the loss of texture, the most important spoilage is the production of chemical products due to microbial metabolism. They produce gas, produce pigments, polysaccharides. Right? Pigments, there will be change in color because of the growth of microorganism. And also they produce bad flavor in the food. The microflora of the cereals and the cereal products, they are varied and they include fungi or mold, yeast, bacteria. The psychotrophic, mesophilic as well as the thermophilic bacteria can cause spoilage. Lactic acid bacteria, rope forming bacteria, bacterial pathogens, coliforms and enterococci. So these are the different types of microbes, microorganism, or to call microflora that can cause spoilage in the cereals. Let us now look into the spoilage of the cereal grains. Bacterial pathogens that contaminate the cereal grains and the cereal products, and those that cause problems in the cereal grains include Bacillus cereus, Clostridium botulinum, Clostridium perfringens, Escherichia coli, and Staphylococcus aureus. Coliforms and enterococci also occur as indicators of unsanitary handling. Unsanitary handling means where there is no cleanliness or hygiene during the process of handling and processing condition and possible fecal contamination. When they use water or utensils or when the person handling the food, they are not hygienic. When it is not processed in a very safe environment, lack of sanitation can cause coliforms and enterococci to spoil the food. Bacteria are frequent surface contaminants of the cereal grains. Surface means they grow over the cereals, on the outer portion of the cereals or the surface of the cereals. For bacteria to grow in the cereal grains, they require moisture or water activity, that is humidity. Bacterial pathogens and spoilage bacteria, like the spore forming bacteria which cause ropiness in bread, may survive and are carried to the processed products and become a problem. So, here you should understand the bacteria which form spores. When they contaminate the cereal grains, the spores will be present in the cereals and the spores will be present even in the cereal products. The rice or the wheat may be converted into a flour, then into a dough, and then they are prepared into a product. So they are also present in the product, which means the spores, they remain even during the cereal processing and they will become a problem when the wheat is converted to a bread. Okay, so they can escape all the processing and they can also cause problem when the wheat flour is converted into a bread. Spoilage in the cereal grains can also occur due to the growth of lactic acid bacteria, which we call as the lactobacillus, and may also be present in the raw grain and carry over into the flour. They are present in the grain, and later when the grain is converted into a flour, they are also present in the flour. They are not affected by the milling process. And cornmeal and spoil the dough prepared with them. They are also present in the meal that are prepared from the grains, and thereby they will appear in the dough and they can spoil the dough when the cereal flour is converted into a dough. Yeast that are present in the cereal grains may also carry through into the processed products. So the yeast, they are present in the cereals and also during the processing, they are carried in the processing in all the steps of processing and they are present in the processed products where they cause spoilage. Many spoilage organisms in the cereal grains are, however, molds. That is, fungi is the common microbe that is causing spoilage in the cereal grains. The major factors involved in the spoilage of the stored grain is by the fungi that include microbial content, moisture level above 12 to 13%. If the moisture is below 12%, then there is no problem. If the moisture level is above 12%, then there is possibly a chance for the growth of microorganisms. It can also cause physical damage and changes in temperature. The most common species of mold that cause spoilage in cereals include Aspergillus, Penicillium, Mucor, Rhizopus, and Fusarium. Many of these molds can cause mycotoxins. We have studied about mycotoxin in detail, and many of these produce mycotoxin that are damaging to the health of human beings. Grains that are spoiled by the molds represent a potential animal or human health hazard. and they also produce a great economic loss. They are not consumable and therefore it cannot be used. They are discarded and therefore they cause economic loss. The microbiology of cereals during growth of the cereal, harvest and the storage is dominated by the molds. Largely, the cereals are spoiled only due to the growth of molds. Thus, Fusarium calmorum and Fusarium graminearum can cause both stem rot and head blight of wheat. These two are the disease of the plant. Stem rot and head blight are the diseases that are produced by the growth of the mold in wheat and barley right in the field, and these field infections may lead to more extensive post-harvest spoilage. After harvest also, they can cause spoilage in these commodities if they are stored at too high a water activity. If the moisture content is more in the wheat and the barley, even after harvest, these two diseases caused by Fusarium calmorum and Fusarium graminearum can damage the cereal grains because of high water activity or when the humidity is more or due to water vapor pressure. The most important genera of the storage fungi are Penicillium and Aspergillus. During the storage, the common spoilage that occurs in the cereal grains are due to Penicillium and Aspergillus, although the species of Fusarium may also be involved in spoilage when the grain is stored under moist conditions. Fusarium is usually, we saw in the earlier slide, that it causes spoilage in the field. And during storage, Penicillium and Aspergillus are the common causes of spoilage. However, Fusarium also can cause spoilage in storage when the moisture content is more. A wet mash of grains or meals will undergo acid fermentation by lactic acid and coliform bacteria present on the plant surfaces. Lactic acid bacteria, the lactobacillus and the coliform bacteria will produce fermentation, acid fermentation by lactic acid bacteria. So fermentation will take place in the cereal grains. This may be followed by an alcoholic fermentation. The first type of change that takes place due to the growth of microorganism is the acid fermentation, production of lactic acid by the activity of bacteria on the carbohydrates that are present in the cereal grains. The carbohydrates are converted to lactic acid, and this is called as the acid fermentation. And after this process, the change or the spoilage, there is alcoholic fermentation. Alcoholic fermentation is produced by yeast. Yeast will convert the carbohydrate into alcohol and carbon dioxide as soon as the acidity has increased enough to favor them. So the first stage in the spoilage is acid fermentation, which is followed by alcoholic fermentation. Acid fermentation is produced by bacteria, particularly the lactic acid bacteria, and the alcoholic fermentation is produced by yeast. Yeast will grow favorably in an acidic environment, and therefore this will enhance the growth of yeast and produce alcoholic fermentation. Finally, mold and yeast will grow on top surface. Although acetic acid bacteria, if present, may oxidize the alcohol to acetic acid and inhibit the mold. Sometimes when the acetic acid bacteria or the lactic acid bacteria are present, they have the capacity to convert the alcohol produced by the yeast into acetic acid. Alcohol will be converted to acetic acid, and now what happens? The medium will become more acidic. Already lactic acid has been produced. Now more of acetic acid has been produced when the alcohol is converted to acetic acid. So the medium is more acidic now. The pH has reduced. Because of reduced pH, there may be sometimes inhibition in the growth of the mold. There are more than 150 species of filamentous fungi and yeast that can grow in the cereals. The filamentous fungi that occur on cereal grains are divided into two groups depending upon when they predominate in grain in relation to the available moisture in the grain. These groups have been referred to as field fungi and the storage fungi. Field fungi include species of Alternaria, Cladosporium, Fusarium, and Helminthosporium. Storage fungi invade grain in storage at low moisture content when the moisture level is less. The main storage fungi are the species of Eurotium, Aspergillus, and Penicillium. Certain molds such as Eurotium glaucus may initiate growth at low moisture content, and through their respiration they will increase the moisture content. See this, the microorganism, the fungi, Eurotium glaucus, they start growing initially in the cereal grains, and by their process of respiration, they will increase the moisture content, which will facilitate the growth of mold, thus ultimately leading to spoilage. The major effects of fungal deterioration of the grains include decreased germination, and the grains can no more germinate. Discoloration, the color of the grains changes. There is development of visible mold growth. You can find sometimes a gray color, black color, or green color growth on the surfaces of the cereals. So that is the visible mold growth. Musty odor. So when you take those grains, you can even see the change in the smell or the flavor. And there is dry matter loss. There is loss of grain. Self-heating occurs. In the center point of the grains that are stored, there is increase in temperature. That is called as self-heating. And caking. Caking is, sometimes we find that they clump together. The cereal grains, they clump together. Katti kattiya irukkirathu. They clump together and they form cake. And the potential for production of mycotoxin in the grain. So because of the fungal activity, there is a possibility of mycotoxin production. Decreased germination of the grain occurs when the storage fungi invade the germ or the embryo part of the grain kernel. So why there is decreased germination? There is decrease in germination. They do not have the ability to grow into a plant because the fungi, they invade the germ portion of the grain. What is the germ portion? Germ portion is the embryo of the grain which has the capacity to grow into a root and a shoot. Right? So the embryos are weak. They die as the storage fungi attack and parasitize the embryo to utilize its oil and other nutrients. So the embryo is the portion where there is more of nutrients that are stored in the grain. The fungi will take away all these nutrients and therefore the grains will lose the capacity to germinate. Decreased germination caused by storage fungi usually precedes the discoloration. So there is a drop in the potential to germinate before the color of the grain changes. Even before the color of the grain changes, there is growth of mold, and because of the growth of mold, there is decreased capacity of the grains to germinate. However, discoloration can be caused by both field as well as storage fungi and can result in brown or black germs. Discoloration can occur. Discoloration is a change in the actual color of the grain. It can occur due to the field fungi as well as the storage fungi, and it results in the presence of brown to black germs in the wheat and corn and the blue eyes in the corn. There is a blue colored pigmentation in the corn due to the presence of blue aspergillus and penicillium species. Musty odors. There is a very typical odor developed because of the growth of the fungus, and that is called as the musty odors. They become apparent before the mold growth becomes visible. Even before we are able to find the growth of the mold with our naked eyes, there is growth of the mold, and this you can detect by smelling the cereals, and it's an early warning of the mold activity.